You may recognize the Justice League as Earth's heroes. However, they were not born heroes, but rather they were made heroes. 20 years ago, they may have instead looked like this. And here, without any hero training, they were sort of equivalent to everyday mundane people. During this first meeting, they witness a robbery. But none of these individuals in the group go and catch the robber. Instead, Timmy, who was alone at the time, goes to catch the robber. So why does Timmy, who is alone, catch the robber, but the individuals that are part of the group stand passively by as bystanders? This is due to the bystander effect that states that the presence of other people inhibits our impulse to help. So Timmy, who is alone, does not succumb to the bystander effect and thus goes to catch the robber. However, the perception that other people are also witnessing the event decreases the probability that any one individual will go to help. Thus, the individuals in the group succumb to the bystander effect and do not go and help catch the robber. In general, the bystander effect states that as group size increases, the bystander effect also increases, leading to a decreased probability that any one individual will go to help. There are two components that contribute to the bystander effect, these two components being collective ignorance and diffusion of responsibility. Often, emergency social situations are ambiguous in nature, and so people look to those around them to define whether or not it is an emergency and how to respond. If Wally looks around him and sees that no one is helping, he might not even be able to recognize that it is an emergency situation that requires intervention. Thus, this leads to a less critical interpretation of the situation and an inhibition of helping behavior. As crowd size increases and more people are thinking in a similar manner, this leads to the inaction of a larger group of people. This makes it harder to recognize that it is an emergency situation, leading to collective ignorance. Timmy, who was alone, may have felt personally responsible to go and help and thus goes to help catch the robber. However, Bruce Wayne, who is in a group, may diffuse his responsibility onto those around him. For example, if this green bar represents the magnitude of Bruce Wayne's personal responsibility, he may think that instead, Clark Kent is more qualified to catch the robber, and thus he diffuses his personal responsibility onto Clark. Timmy, however, who is alone at the time, doesn't have anyone around him to diffuse his responsibility onto, and thus he feels a greater personal responsibility, leading him to go help catch the robber, while Bruce's lesser perceived personal responsibility leads him to remain passively as a bystander. However, there have been situations where people in groups have been seen to help, and the arousal cost-reward model can help us make predictions about helping behavior. When a victim is in distress, a bystander may feel empathetic arousal. This empathetic arousal can be aversive or unpleasant in nature. If the bystander attributes the source of this unpleasant feeling onto the distress of the victim, they will feel motivated to decrease this unpleasant feeling. Often the easiest way to do this is by alleviating the distress of the victim by helping them. Additionally, the bystander goes through a sort of subconscious cost-benefit analysis where there are two types of costs to consider. The first being the cost of helping others. For example, if the victim is in a fire, this poses a personal threat to the bystander, and also the cost of not helping others. So this is the feeling of guilt or this aversive empathetic arousal that is felt when you don't help someone. This model can also help us predict factors that will increase helping behavior and decrease the bystander effect. Often, dangerous situations are less ambiguous in nature, and so you're able to recognize the situation at a faster speed. This leads to an increase in your aversive arousal, leading to an increased motivation to help. Additionally, this leads to an increased cost of not helping. Often, in more dangerous situations, when you don't help, you feel more guilty. This leads to an increased willingness to accept the costs of helping, leading to an overall increase in the probability that one individual will go to help. For example, if instead of a simple robber, it was Lex Luthor with some weapons, this would lead to an increase in aversive arousal, an alteration in the cost-benefit analysis, and ultimately lead to a greater probability that these Justice League members would have went to help. Additionally, greater competency of the bystander minimizes the bystander effect. A more competent individual is often more confident in their ability to help. Thus, they do not diffuse as much responsibility onto those around them. Additionally, if among the crowd, people know that there is a competent individual among them, they will diffuse more of their responsibility onto the competent individual. This leads to an unequal diffusion of responsibility. Overall, this results in the competent individual going to help. For example, if instead Wonder Woman had been a trained hero, she would be the most competent individual among this group and be the most likely to catch the robber. At the end of the day, Timmy caught the robber and called the police. Even Earth's mightiest heroes were not natural-born heroes. Rather, they were made to be heroes through training and recognition of their cognitive biases, like the bystander effect that leads to inaction during social emergencies. By becoming aware of this effect, they were able to take action during social emergencies and show that heroes are not born, but are rather ordinary people that perform extraordinary acts. Thank you.